Trying to predict what will happen in the short term is generally a pretty bad idea. But predicting what's going to happen in the long term and reading the tea leaves can not only lead to much greater wealth by making the right decisions today, but can also lead to much greater freedom. I take a rather value approach to investing and doing business, and I watch a lot of value investors, and one thing they always say is, I don't know whether the stock market will go up or down tomorrow or even this year. Charlie Munger would say if you can't handle a 50% top to bottom up and down in your stock portfolio, you should just go and be a traditional investor and buy an index fund and set it and forget it. But if you're someone who wants to take control not only of your portfolio, but your business and your life, then in my estimation, you need to have a plan for the next decade and really for the decades in the future. So here are my predictions for the next decade or two and what you should expect, because I think that so many people in the West are focused on that next quarter. And how am I going to prepare for what's happening in the next 90 days when they should be focused, as many Asian cultures on, as what's going to happen in the next generation. And so what I see is, look at Jerome Powell, for example, couldn't predict, hey, we're going to have inflation. It's not going to be transitory. Some of the allegedly smartest people in the world aren't really able to figure out what's going to happen tomorrow or next week or next month or next year, and neither should you. You want to figure out, how can I buy something at a reasonable price? How can I get into something at a fair price? And that's going to go up over time. And every day we make the decision to stay in a country in the West where things really have only gotten worse in the last 25 years, not only socially. Freedoms have gone down, rankings have gone down. We publish reports like the Nomad Passport Index. The rankings of countries like the US have gone down consistently in my lifetime. They're not at like the worst levels of any country in the world, but they're much worse than they were, let's say, 25 years ago. And I see that trend continuing. And so every day you choose to stay in a country, keep your money in a country, have your citizenship tied to just one country, you're basically saying, hey, I'm buying it again. You're basically buying that stock every day, rather than saying, could I go somewhere else and make a value investment where my stock is going to go much higher? Because in my lifetime, the rankings for countries like the United States have gone down. They're not in the gutter, but they've certainly been going in the wrong direction. The trend is not your friend. So here are my long-term predictions, not just for the United States, but for all the Western countries that really have relied on having an economic moat by default and haven't been used to competition. So that's the US, Canada, Australia, the UK to a large extent, Germany. They just succeeded because they were the only game in town. And now they're going to squeeze you for more because they're not the only game in town. And you're seeing pushes by the BRICS and other economies to take a greater share of global influence. So number one, taxes in the West are going to go up long term. And I think this requires a fundamental rethink, because everything in the Western world, at least where I'm from in the United States, is based on that your tax rate should go down as you get older. They say put money in an IRA because when you take it out, number one, you'll have a lower income. Whose goal is to have a lower income when they retire? If you save and invest properly, you should have a higher income when you retire. All right? And so they say, oh, you'll have a lower income, as if like that's just the standard. Just accept having less, right? Oh, you won't have a mortgage anymore, so you can have less. But that's just because you're not investing as well as you could. You're probably investing the same stuff they let you invest in your IRA or your 401k. You can't invest in the high growth emerging markets that we talk about here and that we help people with. But not only that, they say, oh, but your tax rate will be lower as well. Does anybody think that tax rates are going to be lower? I think, especially if you have a good amount of money in your IRA, look at what they talked about with Peter Thiel, with the multi-billion-dollar 401k. They're going to make that kind of stuff not allowed. And they're going to say, oh, we're going to be punitive about tax rates. So even on retirement accounts, I think tax rates will go up. But in general, tax rates on your business will go up. They want new taxes on things like windfall profits. And once the tax comes in, the level just keeps going down. Even if they don't legislate it down, inflation will effectively bring it down. And so tax rates are going to go up. And what people say is, well, we'll just vote for Ron DeSantis and he'll change everything. Yes, the guy who's currently, cutting up a deal that his state had with a company that they came to fairly, he just throws the deal out. That's not a free market activity. But even if you think that he's going to save you, he's not going to be in office forever. And look at what's happened. You have George W. Bush, then you have Obama. You have the conservatives, then you have the liberals. And the liberals oftentimes put in place policies that you really can't get rid of. Once you introduce a new tax, it's hard to get rid of that new tax, even if you then go back to the old politicians. And so don't think that one person in office is going to change everything, particularly when the trend is going in one direction. I've been in business my entire life, and my way of looking at things is momentum. And so when the momentum is going against you, you've got to really do something really hard to fix that momentum. And most people and most countries aren't going to do that until they hit rock bottom. Much like alcoholics, you have to be sleeping on the streets above a sewer grate before you say, you know what, maybe I should stop drinking. That's how many people have to find out. And so countries are the same way, especially large countries with large entrenched bureaucracies, large populations where people are owed money by the government. You have more and more people who are getting money from the government, Western economies. Do you think they want to take that difficult turn towards the austerity or whatever you want to call it to fix the problem? No. So tax rates are going to go up because politicians are politicians. They take the easy way out, and they just think they can milk you, the successful person, longer than ever. And they don't realize, because they haven't had to realize historically, that Dubai has rolled out the red carpet. Singapore has rolled out the red carpet. Heck, Georgia and Panama and dozens of countries are saying, please, come here. Greece and Italy are offering tax incentives. I mean, those countries are not low-tax countries, but they're saying, all right, fine, you got us. We got to do something to bring some money into this joint. And somehow the English-speaking Western countries, the big ones, don't think there's any competition. And so that's why they will raise your taxes, because they are operating on a playbook from decades ago. And so are many of the constituents. They think that there's nowhere else to go. I also believe the dollar will go down and be less important. Now, where I distinguish myself from some of the folks who are in this space is I'm not calling for fire and brimstone in this regard. We've seen tremendous gains, for example, in two currencies that we've talked about here, the Georgian lari and the Armenian dram. That's been a good short-term play if you did it. High interest, good appreciation against the US dollar. I'm not calling for Georgia and Armenia to be the new powerhouse economies of the world. But it sets an example that when migration happens, in this case, people going from Russia to Georgia and Armenia, you can see tremendous changes in economies. And so if you missed investing in Georgia, you missed an opportunity. And so I think that as the dollar becomes less significant, as more countries don't want to trade in it, as more people cut it out, that's going to have a marginal impact on not only the value of your dollars, but also on what happens at home in the United States, if that's where you live, or anywhere where you may use dollars. You're going to see more restrictions in the Western world because bullies who get pushed into corners do nasty. It's like the tiger. You push it into the corner and it starts to attack you because they feel like they have fewer options. And so when countries that were used to running the show, basically unimpeded, have to say, oh, well, some percentage of global trade is now being switched to the renminbi or to the rupee, eventually it's going to have an impact, and someone's going to have to pay the price for that. And I also think that with that, you'll see emerging economies growing faster. I was talking to a friend of mine in Cambodia, and you've seen 500% to 600% growth since 2007, even in things as simple as the real estate market. Forget about investing in private companies and stuff like that. Obviously, the stock market and that kind of economy is not very developed. But look at going back to 2007, even 2008 in the United States, you have about 500 different cities that have not even come back to the levels before the crash. Obviously, places like Austin, Texas have done very well, but they haven't gone up 500% to 600% just on a kind of throw a dart and hit it and make money. And so you're going to see those countries becoming more and more significant, just as you're seeing, let's say, in Cambodia. You're seeing banks from Singapore, more so from Malaysia, some of the more developed economies in the region, going in and starting. Then they're bringing entrepreneurship. They're bringing capital. They're building skyscrapers. There is a boom happening in Southeast Asia, South Asia, parts of Africa, parts of South America. And if you are able to invest in those, I think you'll be very successful. In many cases, if you were to go and live somewhere else where there was a better tax climate, those investments would have a better tax situation as well. So the taxes in those countries may be lower. Now, you won't benefit from that if you're just sitting in the United States or Canada, because you're taxed on the income you generate, and you pay tax to Canada or the United States. But if you were to say, hey, I'm going to move to Dubai, and I'm going to see how the world is unfolding, these emerging economies, I'm going to put some money into them, you've got a great personal tax situation, and your investments will be lower tax, and they will be likely higher return. And so rather than sitting around and saying, I'm going to vote for the right person and hope that my country doesn't raise my taxes, hope that they don't do, as they see that their currency is less used, hey, I'm going to just hope and pray that we solve this. Politicians don't really solve many problems. You solve problems. If you run a business, your politicians, they're not the ones helping you. Right? Now, if you run a business, you can survive to some level under any politician. right? The idea that you should shut down your business because Biden got in office, it's going to be harder. But if you're good, you will survive. But why do you want to make your life difficult? Warren Buffett talks about, don't jump over a 7-foot bar when you can step over a 1-foot bar. You don't get extra points for jumping over and making your life harder. So why make your life harder if you can move your business to an emerging economy? If you can move your business to a tax-free country? Why don't you want to take advantage of the fact that there are already lower taxes in other countries? Nomad Capitalist helps people move their business to not just one country. Lots of consultants in Dubai will tell you how Dubai is wonderful. We have over a dozen countries that most people will move their business to. And by the way, if you want to live in Europe, Dubai may not work for you. Right? You can pay low taxes in many countries in Europe these days as a foreigner, but Dubai may not be one of the ones on the list. And so you want someone to help you holistically figure out, okay, I agree, Andrew, taxes are going to go up. And I don't want to wait for politicians. I figured this out finally in 2012. As I sat in Turkey and watched Obama get reelected. I'm sure there's some things I actually agreed with Obama on. That's what happens when you live internationally. You can see the nuance. But on the tax stuff, I didn't agree. On the you didn't build that, I don't agree. And so I said, this is hopeless. I realized for the final time, this is hopeless. Sitting around and voting is not going to change anything. So if you agree with me, why aren't we setting up, either your backup plan or where am I moving my business? Where am I getting my bank account? Which currencies am I going to hold? How does that affect my taxes where I live now, especially if I'm not prepared to move yet? This is what Nomad Capitalist helps people figure out. We have our entire in-house real estate division with people on the ground doing fair market deals all over the world in dozens of markets. We built that network. We have tax and immigration folks that we've worked with that I found, some of them 10 years ago. We put all the pieces together so that you get a plan, so that the predictions for the next decade of how taxes are going to go up, your currency is going to be a little less relevant. You're going to miss out on some of the biggest gains in the world if you're staying invested in one part of the market. And you know what? There's probably going to be some restrictions on you personally in terms of, hey, we're going to grab some of your cash. Hey, we're going to make it harder to travel. Hey, we're going to slowly renew your passport because we don't want you to go anywhere. Who knows what's going to happen? But some of this stuff may never happen, but you want to be prepared for what's going to happen because you don't want to think for just the next quarter. For the next quarter, I'm fine. Do you know how many people came to us during COVID? Many of them got a second passport. But some of them came towards the end like, you know what, I'll do it later. You may not be able to do it later. I believe that, and I put my money where my mouth is. As a guy who has multiple passports, multiple residences, I read my list of bank accounts to someone the other day, and it took me like half an hour to go through the list and explain it. I'm already prepared. I've already done the hard work. It's been excruciating at times. We can help you do it without the excruciating work. But you've got to first admit, things aren't going to be what they always were.